communist on the faculty of one university is one communist too many. One communist among the American advisors at Yalta was one communist too many. And even if there were only one communist in the State Department, even if there were only one communist in the State Department, that would still be one communist too many.
And why am I showing that clip again? Because I was criticized last week on another show for talking about the new McCarthyism. Yeah, Joe McCarthy was probably right about a lot of communists infiltrating the U.S. government. But the way he went about it with smear tactics and imaginary lists and just generalizing the accusation was wrong. And I tell you, it's happening again. Now, this broadcast today is about the deep state and how it's going after journalists, how it's going after anybody who happens to disagree with the narrative of the deep state. And that includes not just the liberals, conservatives and the NDP. They're in lockstep with the liberals on a lot of issues. And we're going to be examining that. But first of all, how did the deep state manifest itself with this India turmoil? Do you notice suddenly we're not talking about India anymore? It's still there. The RCMP apparently have all kinds of onerous charges pending. It's a huge investigation. Justin Trudeau used it as a means of distraction during the foreign interference inquiry, the Hogue inquiry. He managed to be just like Joe McCarthy and smear the entire Conservative caucus with potentially being in the pay of some foreign government. He didn't say which one. This is how the deep state operates, my friends. And if you've ever been affected by it, we're going to be talking about David Pugliese, Ottawa Citizen investigative reporter whom I've known for many years. Not well. I met him when I worked on Parliament Hill. He's a good journalist, and he's not a red spy, and he wasn't a red spy when we still have a Soviet Union, and he's not working for the Russians today. But let's examine what Trudeau is up to with India right now, because it is incredible how he has managed to call a whistleblower criminal. We don't know who that was. The one who blew the whistle on Chinese interference. And he leaked that information to the Canadian media. Justin Trudeau says that's criminal. But it's not criminal for Justin Trudeau to leak information to the Washington Post. Let's watch this excellent report from India. We'll watch most of it anyway.
Let's turn to Canada now, where Justin Trudeau is getting exposed again. Not by India, though. This time, by the Canadian media. Let me show you a new report by the Globe and Mail. It says Canadian officials leaked intelligence on India to US media, specifically the Washington Post. We're talking about secret documents here, documents that were embargoed by security agencies. Yet Canada leaked those documents to the Washington Post. 2 officials were involved in this leak. Both of them have been outed. The first is Natalie Drouin. She is National Security Advisor to Justin Trudeau. The second is David Morrison. He is the Deputy Foreign Minister of Canada. We are talking about two very senior officials here, people very close to the Prime Minister. If they have leaked something, it means Trudeau signed off, or at least he was aware of it. Earlier this month, these officials spoke to Washington Post. They revealed information on the Khalistan case. Of course, the Washington Post ran with it. They published their piece on October 14th. It linked India to the murder of a Sikh man in Winnipeg. It also singled out Home Minister Amit Shah, the Home Minister of India. The report talked about him. Clearly, Trudeau's ministers told them about all of this, that too without evidence, because Canadian police have not named Amit Shah, nor have they drawn links to the killing in Winnipeg. So the point of this leak was to smear India. And that's not even the worst part. Trudeau willingly allowed intelligence on India to be leaked, but he was livid when intel on China was leaked. He called it a criminal act. Listen to this.
The issue with the criminal who leaked this information is they got it wrong in what they leaked. And regardless of what's in the newspapers or not, it is incumbent upon a serious, responsible government not to react to partisan attacks or erroneous but salacious headlines.
Does Justin Trudeau even know what the word salacious means? Usually means sexually dirty, and that's nothing to do with this report. But this is not a responsible government or a serious government. The Canadian government has become a joke. And here it is, leaking information to the Washington Post so Justin Trudeau can distract us all about how evil the Indian diplomats are, sitting around plotting to kill Khalistanis. And the Khalistanis, of course, are the terrorists. So this is absolutely outrageous what's going on here. And Justin Trudeau, of course, is one of the best representatives of the deep state, but these deputies are just emblematic of how entrenched the deep state is and why this won't change when Pierre Poilievre becomes prime minister unless he does a real serious assessment of who's working in Ottawa and where their loyalties are and who they want to advance. So this is the charade that's going on here with Justin Trudeau. He's smearing conservative MPs. He's smearing Indian diplomats. He's smearing the entire country because it's for his political purposes. And that's the only reason he's doing this. I'll listen to a little bit more, then we'll get to David Pugliese, because I think this is an incredibly important issue of the hour. And I'll get into more of that in a minute.
So leaks on China are bad, but leaks on India are fine. Is it because you authorized this one, or because the China leak puts you in a bad light?
That's exactly why. And this is how this is being covered by the Indian news. Now let's have a look at what's happening to David Pugliese. If you don't know David Pugliese, he's a defense reporter for the Ottawa Citizen for Post Media. His work appears across the country. Now, I've known David Pugliese when I first came to Ottawa to work for the official opposition defense critic of the time, Member of Parliament Art Hanger from Calgary Northeast at that time. It was in 1999. And David Pugliese had the same objective as I did, having just left the military for the first time, which was to expose corruption and to expose politics in the Canadian Armed Forces. Now, Pugliese never had a political axe to grind. He wasn't trying to get the Liberals elected or the Conservatives elected. He was truly a journalist in the old sense of being distrustful of all politicians. Journalists should be. Never be in the pocket of politicians. Never think the politicians are telling you the truth without making sure first. Pugliese was always a good journalist. I didn't always agree with his conclusions. And certainly the Department of National Defense didn't always agree with his conclusions, and they didn't like his reporting. But he was a good reporter. And he certainly wasn't in the pay of the KGB. And today suggests now suddenly the Russians are paying him because he's dared to oppose the prevailing narrative about the war in Ukraine. He's dared to talk about Chrystia Freeland's grandfather being a Nazi propagandist, which he was. And even the conservatives don't want to talk about that. Oh, no. When it comes to Ukraine, Chrystia Freeland's our friend. This is absolute BS, and I'm sick of it. Let's listen to this report from Global.
I would like now to welcome our witnesses today.
At a parliamentary committee investigating Russian interference, this former senior conservative minister dropped a bombshell.
For decades, Moscow has been recruiting and paying policymakers, influencers, politicians, journalists, and others to act as their proxies.
Chris Alexander claimed that veteran Canadian journalist David Pugliese was recruited by the KGB more than 3 decades ago to be a Russian agent. As evidence, Alexander presented what he says are KGB archival documents from 1984 to 1990, when Pugliese was just starting out as a journalist. The KGB officers discussed plans to recruit Pugliese, whom they described.
Notice how his name is spelled capital in English and it's in brackets. Very interesting. What does this remind you of, by the way? We'll watch the rest of this, but what does this remind you of? The Steele dossier. The Steele dossier in the United States from this former MI6 agent, which was behind all of this Russian collusion hoax with Donald Trump. Clearly, they were shopping these documents out.
As sympathetic to the Soviet cause.
These records document a KGB operation to talent spot, recruit, develop, and run as an agent.
Well, when I saw that it was a rollover, I immediately...
For 35 years, Pugliese has worked for the Ottawa Citizen, now owned by Post Media, becoming one of its senior journalists, writing articles on defense and security, including a lot of stories on Ukraine.
His recent subjects are instructive. Countless stories about Ukraine's Nazi links or Nazis in Canada. These are...
Yeah, there are a lot of Nazis in Canada. It's historical fact, you idiot. I have no time at all for Chris Alexander. I don't give a damn if he was immigration minister under Stephen Harper or what the hell he did. He's serving a purpose right now, and that's serving the purpose of the deep state to smear the reputation of people. Of course there were Nazis in Canada after the Second World War. We invited them here. Overwhelming historical proof of that. It's not even the subject of debate. And of course, there are neo-Nazis operating in Ukrainian regiments. Not even the subject of debate. Oh, but we're not allowed to talk about that because we're in the pocket of Ukraine.
Themes that Moscow would be delighted to promote.
Alexander says there's every reason to believe Pugliese has continued his work as a Russian agent. Pugliese denies that he ever was a Russian agent.
I was never approached by anybody, Russians, Chinese, you name it. And no, I'm not a Russian spy.
Nor, he says, has he ever been questioned by CSIS or police.
This is an attack on my journalism. I am a journalist who reports on the military, and my reporting upsets a lot of people.
And he believes the KGB documents are fake. Earlier this year, Global News received what appear to be the same KGB documents. 8 pages. They're
same documents. Somebody's shopping these things around. Isn't it bloody well obvious? I mean, this is just so typical.
Copies, not originals, and we were unable to independently verify their authenticity. But several experts told us that while it's impossible to say for certain, these documents appear to be real.
One piece of evidence...
This former RCMP officer runs a document forensics firm.
There were a number of things that really jumped out.
He says everything from the typewriter and fountain pens to the rubber stamps are consistent with KGB documents from that time.
The most logical conclusion by far is that these are in fact authentic documents.
But experts say just as critical is what the documents don't say.
There's no smoking gun here. Nothing in these documents clearly says that this individual was even approached, or certainly says that that approach was successful. All they do is say this is something worth exploring.
This is exactly what happened during the McCarthy period. if your name appeared on a document that had anything to do with the Communist Party of the United States, a meeting of the Communist Party of the United States, you were immediately implicated and immediately judged as being guilty. So his name appears on these documents. The documents might be KGB documents, but his name appears on these documents, so therefore he's immediately guilty. And he's guilty, 35 years later? This is just abject idiocy.
By making those allegations at a parliamentary committee, Chris Alexander is protected from any legal prosecution, and he declined our request for an on-camera interview. In the
Yeah, I wonder why Chris Alexander is not going on the media, all over the media right now, making these accusations. If he's so concerned about it, if he's such a great patriot fighting for Canada, what a joke. He knows he's going to be sued for defamation as soon as he leaves the committee room. So he's not going on television talking about this. I am just so sick of these deep state actors trying to get away with this crap because they're protected in committee and in parliament, and they know it, and they don't repeat these allegations outside of it. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Meantime, Pugliese has also asked for standing at the committee to share his side of the story and says so far he hasn't received a response. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
You think he's going to get a chance to defend himself? I used to sit on committees every day when I worked at the House of Commons. And I'll tell you who gets the call. You have to get an invitation from one of the members of parliament, either with the government or the opposition. And yeah, if you're on the list of preferred invites or invitees, you'll get the invitation. If you're not on the list, if the government and the opposition party don't want you there because your testimony might disturb the existing narrative, you ain't going to get invited. And you're not going to appear before the committee. Even if he wants to go there and defend his reputation against smears, no, won't be invited. So he has got to go around on Twitter, or X, excuse me, and do interviews with Global News to say, hey, what's going on here? I've just been a journalist all of my adult life. Let's listen to this as he defends himself in a radio interview.
Yeah. Well, first of all, a couple of things, right? So the documents say I was, like I said, I come back and I was recruited in 1984. I was a permanent resident of Ottawa. It's bullshit. Didn't even live in Ottawa. You know, it's fascinating to see all these records in Russian, but there's my name in English. So what, does the KGB need to write in English now? This is, divide Canadians. You know what? I'm going to keep reporting on procurement. I'm going to keep reporting on rape in the Canadian Forces. I'm going to keep reporting on criminality. And he can say this stuff, but it's not going to stop me. One of the other things that he was upset about is I do a lot of stories about the Holocaust and Nazi war criminals in Canada. You know, I have written a couple of stories about Krista Freeland's grandfather, who was a Nazi propagandist. And this seems to be very upsetting to Mr. Bazan, the conservative.
Yeah, what is going on here? James Bazan, the conservative defense critic, a friend of mine. I know James very well. And I've always gone to James in the past for comment from the conservative, from the official opposition, when the liberals make defense policy statements. Always gone to James. I know James very well. And he's been on this program to talk about defense matters. And he's been on previous shows I had with the Western Standard. Now, what is going on with James Bazan? Why does James Bazan object? I wasn't even aware of this, but if James Bazan is objecting to talk historical data relating to Chrystia Freeland's grandfather, there's something going on here. There's something wrong with this picture.
Conservative member and Mr. Chris Alexander.
I mean, I know Chrystia Freeland was unhappy about that, and they did their own kind of press ops with that, trying to we were told, oh, don't believe this is all misinformation. Turned out to be true.
Yes, it turned out to be true. I mean, you can go to I've worked with the Holocaust museums in Washington and Los Angeles. The newspapers that the grandfather edited with virulent anti-Semitic articles are there with his name. So, but this is another part of it as well, right? So I think I've really ticked off a lot of people in official Ottawa with whether it's my reporting on the Nazi war criminals, whether it's my reporting on the victims of communism memorial that they're putting up there, which is full of alleged Nazi collaborator names, whether it's my procurement stories on military procurement, whether wasting or allegedly wasting billions of dollars. This is your money, right? And so, yeah, I'm doing my job as a journalist.
Do you think that Chris Alexander believes that you're a KGB agent?
I don't know what that guy believes. I don't know what he believes. You should ask him.
Yeah. And guess who else has appeared before this Public Safety Committee? And I wonder who invited this atrocity to show up. If this doesn't tell you there's something wrong here, because yeah, you'll find I'm keeping this as a little surprise. You probably didn't know this, but you've seen this. You've seen this woman. She was the very, very briefly. She was the disinformation czar for Joe Biden until there was such an upsurge of outrage over creating such a position that she was fired.
Information laundering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origins are slightly less atrocious. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. When Rudy Giuliani shared that intel from Ukraine, or when TikTok influencers say COVID can cause pain, they're laundering disinfo and we really should take note and not support their lies with our wallet, voice or vote. Oh!
What a absolute atrocity. Yes.
There was a need to update our laws regarding social media influencers. Now, could you expand on that a little bit? Did you mean that in terms of the Elections Canada Act or in terms of regulations for social media companies in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am not an expert on Canadian law, but I did just take a look in preparation for the testimony to see.
Nina Jankowicz, former Biden censorship czar, worked at the Department of Homeland Security in charge of stomping out disinformation. So she's being invited to our committee to say how Canada can stomp out disinformation, how Canada can eradicate free speech. This is absolutely striking.
What laws on influencers you had. As I understand it, there are regulations governing what influencers do when they are doing product placement in the Competitions Act. In the Elections Act, as I understand it, folks...
She doesn't understand very much, and everything she says ends with an intonation as a question. Can't stand that, never could. She can't make a statement, everything is a question, because she's not sure.
They're only required to disclose if they've been paid for content if it's coming from a political actor themselves. And so with something like Tenet Media, where you might want a disclosure saying, where is this money coming from? Also encouraging the influencers themselves to know their customer and know who they're doing the bidding on behalf of, which the Americans in the case of Tenet Media did not. Essentially, there's a loophole there, right? Because it's just a media company, they're paying them to create media, but they're creating political content. And so what I would argue is that you might need to close that loophole by encouraging influencers who are creating political content to also have those sorts of disclosures if they're being paid by someone.
It's how you hide a little lie.
So there you have it. This is what is really infuriating. And I'm going to call or email David Pugliese today. I want him on the show next week, if he can, to talk about this, because this is absolutely outrageous. Because the Defense Committee is examining disinformation and misinformation. The Public Safety Committee is examining misinformation and disinformation. It has gone wild. All of these committees, and what is scary is that the government and the opposition are in lockstep over it. They all think we have to stamp out anybody who disagrees with the prevailing narrative, especially with regards to the war in Ukraine. And this is just classic deep state smear tactics. And that is what is going on here. And you know what else Chris Alexander has said is that the Freedom Convoy was under the influence and perhaps even the pay of the Russians. The Freedom Convoy? Where does that crap come from? This is all nonsense. And these people who come out of the woodwork, who come out from under their rock to appear before a committee, this guy hasn't been in the House of Commons since 2014, 10 years, since he was defeated by Liberal Mark Holland. Yeah, that's how long we haven't had Chris Alexander in the House of Commons. And he comes back as an expert. Yeah, he knows where the communists are. Oops, well, I mean those pro-Russian people. And I say again, we are on the precipice of a bloody nuclear war. Open your eyes. I know you are, but if you have any conception about the danger we are in right now on a two-front war, one in Ukraine and the other in the Middle East, we are literally steps away, days away from a nuclear holocaust if things are not de-escalated quickly. This is not the time to drag these witnesses in front of these committees to talk about how evil Russia is and how we should all get on a big hate for Russia. Isn't it ironic that the liberals are always talking about hate crimes? And they're always talking about the need to have more legislation to stop so-called hate crimes. But these are the people who are drumming up the hatred against Russia right now, so that we're all good and ready, roaring to go, as Justin Trudeau would say, for another war. This time, it's going to be a thermonuclear war, if we have one. And that's what these people are trying to do. It's insane. But I feel sometimes like I'm talking in a vacuum, because everybody out there thinks, we just got to be more vigilant about this Russian threat. We have to seek accommodation. We have to seek peace in the Middle East and in Ukraine, or else it will spill over into our lives. And people who really do understand the situation, the strategic situation today, will tell you the same thing. We have never been in a more dangerous position, ever. This is as dangerous, if not more so, than the Cuban Missile Crisis of October, and we're still on October 1962. We are on very, very tenuous and weak ground right now. So I encourage you, stay vigilant against propaganda. Don't let the deep state tell you what to believe. And my God, I don't agree with every journalist out there. I don't agree with all the work they've done. Pugliese's done some great work exposing corruption in the military, and there's lots of it, I can tell you that. But we need voices out there, unfettered voices, not to be silenced or censored by Nina Jankowicz, not to be silenced or censored by Chris Alexander, whoever the hell that is anymore, not to be silenced by liberals or conservatives who don't want the prevailing narratives upset or disputed. Canada needs to continue to fight for free speech. And when I see this, about this unity in these parliamentary committees over disinformation and misinformation and censoring everybody that they disagree with, it's no wonder to me why Bill C-63 is at its second reading last week, and why this bill is continuing to go through the House of Commons with not enough virulent opposition. It is the most dangerous piece of legislation in the country today. Even worse than C-293, which is stupid and insane, potentially outlawing meat products. This bill will potentially outlaw your free speech, potentially criminalize your thoughts. That's where the Liberal Party is at. And the Conservative Party had better get more serious in their opposition to this, or else this bill could pass before the next election. And that is very, very grave. And we need to take that threat very seriously. Thank you for watching me on a Sunday morning. It's a beautiful day here. Well, it was when I started anyway. It's October 27th. You've been listening to David Krayden. I'm the host of Kraydens Right. I try to be right about most things. And when I'm not, you tell me. The show, of course, is Kraydens Right, the station. Or the show, of course, is Stand on Guard. The station is Kraydens Right. We do our best to give you all the news you need to know. And not only that, to give you the news you need to know and the information so you can continue to resolve to resist. I'm sorry I didn't play more of your comments today. I'm going to do that tomorrow. The House is back in session. It has been for a week. Trudeau's leadership remains tenuous. But watch what happens with the Bloc on Monday and Tuesday. Watch what happens with potential non-confidence votes this week. This could be the end of the Liberal government. This could be the end of Justin Trudeau. Not that he's going to resign, but he's going to take his party into another election and be defeated. Thanks for watching today. God bless you. Go to church, go to tabernacle, go to temple, go to synagogue, if that's what you choose to do. But get out and see people, because you remember what they did to us during the pandemic. We couldn't go out. We couldn't meet people on Sunday. We couldn't attend our churches, our synagogues, our tabernacles, our temples, because that was too dangerous. See you tomorrow.